Blood splattered the cockpit windows from the inside. He screamed, "I'm hit!" and went silent. A German fighter pulled alongside, signaling, "Surrender or die." Then the tail ripped off midair, with 2 men still inside. What happened next defied every law of survival. But let's start from the beginning. They launched just after 0400. The cold wrapped around the airfield like a vice. Ice creaked under boots, and engines coughed awake one by one, forming a mechanical chorus that rattled the lungs and numbed the fingers. In the briefing tent, no one had spoken after the target was revealed. Dresden. The silence wasn't shock. It was resignation. Another city, another sea of fire, another day some of them wouldn't come back. The B-17G Red Molly sat at the edge of the tarmac, her silver skin dull under moonlight, streaked with oil and grime from 27 prior missions. Her nose art had once been a pinup. Now it looked more like a ghost. Lieutenant Charles Chuck Henson, 23, climbed into the pilot seat and adjusted the straps across his chest like a ritual. His father's old army watch ticked louder than the engines in his head. Next to him, co-pilot Tom Hill checked the gauges, the letters from his sister and fiancée pressing against his chest plate like prayers too late to speak. Tail gunner Calvin Reese sat alone in the back, cleaning his belt of 50s. He'd stopped talking a week ago, after the mission over Frankfurt, when Davis's bomber caught fire midair. Reese had watched Davis burn through his own canopy trying to escape. Since then, Reese only stared at the floor or out into the void. When he spoke, it was always the same. "One of us won't come back this time. Maybe 2. Navigator Billy McGinnis tried to crack a joke about Valentine's Day and chocolate bombs, but no one laughed. Ball turret gunner Jesse Shorty Delgado didn't even flinch. He was already in his cramped sphere, palms pressed together, whispering prayers like secrets he was too afraid to tell out loud. The waist gunners, Roy and Ray Lancaster, Kansas-born twins, checked each other's gear in silence. They moved like a single unit now. No words, just nods and muscle memory. They didn't smile anymore. At 0617, the formation lifted from the frozen earth and climbed into a sky that promised nothing but gray. By 0800, the sun peeked through in faint streaks. From above, the formation looked solid, 80 bombers in staggered boxes, shining like plated armor. Chuck scanned the other planes through the cockpit glass. It was the illusion of safety. Together, they looked untouchable. But inside Red Molly, no one believed that anymore. Palmer, the radio man, crackled over the intercom. "Command says possible 190s ahead. Keep eyes open." Minutes later, the flak began. First as distant flowers in the sky, black petals blooming in silence. Then closer, louder. The plane jolted as a shockwave punched through the hull. They were 20 minutes out from target. The formation began to loosen. One B-17 took a hit to the right wing. Chuck saw it spin into a lazy corkscrew, breaking apart midair. No chutes opened. Someone behind him whispered, "Jesus." Then came the bandits, 3 Focke-Wulf 190s, diving from the sun like hawks. Reese's voice cut the silence like a blade. "Bandits! 9 o'clock high!" And then everything shattered. The windshield cracked in 1,000 directions. Tom Hill screamed, "I'm hit!" A geyser of blood sprayed across the inside of the cockpit glass. Thick, red, hot. Chuck flinched, blinded. He reached out, hands groping. Found Hill's shoulder, slack. Found Hill's mouth, moving. I'm still here, Chuck," the boy whispered, bubbles of blood dancing on his lips. And then, silence. Chuck fought the panic, grabbed the controls, shouted into the intercom, "Ball, you still with us?" Nothing. "Shorty? Jesse?" Still nothing. The plane dropped, sudden and brutal. 100 feet in a second. Outside, the sky turned black with more flak. Below them, another fortress blew apart mid-dive. The formation was gone. They were alone now, and far from safe. There was a grinding sound. Chuck thought maybe the ball turret was jammed. He keyed the intercom again. "Shorty, if you're alive, say something." The gunner's voice came finally, cracked and ragged. "I'm alive, sir. Stuck. Bleeding. Can't move legs." Chuck forced his breathing to calm. "Hang in there. We'll bring you home." "Don't lie, sir." Chuck didn't answer, because Shorty was right. The left waist gun was gone. Literally gone. Blown open. Ray had taken a direct hit. His body wasn't in one piece. Roy was screaming, not from pain, from rage. "They hit him! My brother! They killed my brother!" "Stay on the gun!" Chuck roared back. "We're not done yet!" But they were. They just didn't know it yet. The plane was limping. One engine gone. Another smoking. The flak hadn't stopped. Each black bloom came closer. Every second, the Molly was closer to being shredded like the others. Then Palmer called out. "They want us to drop. They're signaling surrender." "What?" "There's a 190 pacing us. Pilot's holding up his hand, not shooting, just staring, gesturing down." Chuck risked a look. The German pilot was young, too young. He held up a hand again, then made a cutting motion across his throat. "Drop now, or we kill everyone left." Shorty's voice crackled again. "I don't care. Let me fall with this bucket. I'm not dying in their prison." Chuck looked back at the crew. Roy's eyes were wild. Palmer's hands shook. McGinnis kept muttering a prayer over and over. Reese? Still silent, staring down the guns like they were alive. And then, the decision was made for them. A second German fighter opened fire without warning. The cockpit exploded in sparks. Palmer vanished in a mist of red. Another scream. Chuck wasn't sure if it was his own. The Molly's left wing cracked. Fuel sprayed out like blood. The tail section bucked and detached. Chuck never saw Reese again. The sky was sideways. Everything twisted, screamed. The tail fell in silence. Shorty was still in the ball. Chuck was in the cockpit, but barely. It had torn open like paper. The ground rushed toward him, dark, green, and full of sharp things. He blacked out before impact. When he woke, the world was slow, quiet. He was in a field, alone. One arm bent wrong, breathing shallow. He moved once, screamed, then again. The third time, he passed out. He came to in a barn. Old wood, hay, chickens. A boy stared at him. A woman brought water. She didn't speak English. He learned later they were Czech. They had risked everything dragging him from the wreck. They stitched his arm, took out shrapnel with kitchen knives. He asked about his crew. No one answered. Weeks passed. A truck came. Not Americans. Germans. He was a prisoner after all. But even the Wehrmacht soldiers looked at him with something like pity. Only two had survived, Chuck and Jesse Delgado. The rest were buried in frozen ground across 3 miles. Chuck lost 2 fingers, partial vision, and, some said, his soul. Jesse lost both legs. They didn't speak for years. Chuck came back in '46. He didn't want a parade. He didn't want a medal. He just wanted quiet. He married, had a son, never talked about the war. But in 1978, his boy found an old oxygen mask in the attic, stained with something brown. Chuck told him the truth that night. All of it. The son wrote it down. That story, the blood on the inside, was read in classrooms, posted on war forums, printed in newsletters for vets. Jesse died in '92. Chuck followed in '99. They were buried side by side, even though they hadn't spoken in decades. On Chuck's headstone, his son carved. He held formation until it wasn't there anymore, and still didn't let go. Every year, someone leaves a small bottle of machine oil and a cracked set of headphones at the grave. No one knows who, but maybe that's the point. Some formations, just like some memories, never fall apart, even when everything else does.